Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It's time to open a refrigerator or garbage can or whatever it was right at the very moment the microphone opened up. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. It is Monday, February 27th, 2023. Time for another show. We're still in our 2 days a week from home for the production staff schedule. So, yeah. There's a little noise. So what? It's breakfast time. You're probably doing the same. I realized as I was about to press the button and open things up, hey, I don't know any news. So I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Or you can hang around, of course, and wait for Greg Dworkin to bring you his collection of news stories. My news collection from the weekend extends to, let's see, I met with a group of some 18,000 snow geese over the weekend, but they also had no idea what was going on news-wise, and they didn't really have much to say that I could understand. But they're doing fine. The water, I assume, that they're floating in is freezing cold, but they're snow geese, so I guess they're used to it. I was in, pardon me, where was I? Well, we were in the Middle Creek Wildlife Management Area in the neighborhood of, what do they call it? Newmanstown, Pennsylvania, I think. Lancaster County, as I understand it. And, nice spot. And apparently, you wouldn't know it unless you already knew it. But every year, this is a way station of sorts on the migration path of snow geese. Canada geese is what I think we're now calling, what we used to call Canadian geese. Now they're just Canada geese. And I'm not certain what accounts for that change, and tundra swans. So, it's a rare chance for someone from Virginia to see anything that has tundra in the name, I guess, except they apparently winter around here, down in southeastern Virginia, the Tidewater area, and so, I guess they're frequent guests, but I guess the fact that that they tend to do their wintering probably on, well, A, on water, and B, not that near where you and I would just be hanging out in large suburban groups, but rather away from humans who might tend to bother them, shoot them, eat them, dump chemicals in their water, whatever it is. It's just interesting to know that not far from where you've been spending your time hanging out, doing your shopping, picking up the mail, taking the kids to, taekwondo practice or the dentist. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of these swans. Apparently they moved a little earlier this year because it's 80 degrees and they think it's already spring, so they're on their way back. So we didn't see... Normally about this time of year, apparently you'll see something like 180,000, 200,000 of these geese on this pond. And also usually it's partially frozen. And so they're all concentrated in one area. And there's this amazing, crazy looking mass of snow geese. It was still pretty crazy looking if you ask me. But I'm not a snow goose. So, there's some bias in that. Anyway, plenty of other things going on. I'm positive about it. Lots of people were just interacting with humans all weekend, talking to humans, and they probably, a lot of their times, their job depends on writing what they talk to other humans about. As far as I can make out, the other news of the weekend, besides the snow geese, was that Dilbert was canceled as the and I use that term advisedly, canceled. That's what people call it when they get in trouble for opening their mouths and saying something stupid, and people get mad at them and say, I'm not going to do any more business with that guy. That's now canceled, and that's cancel culture. That's actually, we know it as accountability. And Scott Adams, the artist, illustrator behind Dilbert, which, as cartoons go, I don't know. I think I last read a Dilbert, actively, like, hey, what's in Dilbert today? It's got to be like 30-something, 40. I don't know. How long has it even been going on that long? It's a long time since I, ever, and I never felt as I did when I was a kid, like 10, 12 years old. I wonder what's happening in today's whatever the comic. I've never felt that about Dilbert, but it was funny, ish. Good look at the foibles of office life. And then anyway, so I guess now he's upset because it's apparently bad to say that white people should stay the hell away from black people. Gosh, I can't believe why anybody would say that. Although it is interesting. In a certain sense, I suppose you could say that. Like, I suppose you might say, I don't know, black people keep getting killed by white cops, and now they occasionally get killed by white people who wish they were cops or think they're cops, but who have pickup trucks and guns and will chase us around the neighborhood. It's one thing, I guess, for black people to say, black people should stay the hell away from white people, or white people should stay the hell away from us. But well, as you know, it's a totally different thing. And there's a lot of wink, wink, nudge, nudge that goes along with the language. For instance, I guess one of the other things that he's allegedly in trouble for, and who knows whether, he's telling the truth about these things or not, but that he last got himself in trouble by saying, he's upset because he was in trouble for saying, it's okay to be white. All I said was it was okay to be white. And of course it is, in a different, sense from the way the phrase gets used. It's okay. I mean, you are white. That's okay. It's a thing. You didn't control it. It happens. But the it's okay to be white is a wink, wink, nudge, nudge among, well, very often white supremacists and those adjacent to them. It's like complaining, all I did was put some numbers on this website, and they're totally legitimate numbers. I mean, everybody's heard of the number 14, right? And the number 88, it's just a number. It has 2 8s in it. It's easy to draw. People love it. And so 1488, I know, but among white supremacists, neo-Nazis, it's got a meaning, just as it's okay to be white has a certain specific meaning among them. And you just got to recognize that. And if you don't, and you just blurt that out and someone explains it to you and you're a normal person, you say, oh, I didn't realize that. That's terrible. I just wanted to say that, I'm just a regular person and don't have to worry about me, and I'm not going to hurt anybody. And that's all I really meant to say. Okay, that would be a perfectly nice message to have. But wink, wink. I don't know why I said, I don't even know who Hitler is. I just said hail him, and I was just saying hi. Yeah, sure. Okay, right, whatever. Anyway, Greg Dworkin is here. He may or may not have had encounters with waterfowl this weekend himself. Let's check it out.
I did not.
You did not? No, well.
But I do have a
You're
Canadian
very adamant
story,
about that.
Or maybe it's a Canada story. I don't know if that's the proper pronunciation.
Canada.
Canada. I cannot think a thing about it, but, this is really weird. Okay, there's this German politician.
Well, all right. It's Hitler.
No,
it's not.
It's not Hitler.
The other one we know is Merkel.
And it's not like I was saying hello to my neighbor George Hitler and said hi Hitler, and you just misinterpreted. That's not what happened. There's this German politician.
Hitler. Yes.
Her name is Christine Anderson, and she's a member of the AFD.
Okay,
which is
we've
the
heard
far-right crazy loon group
after
in Germany.
It
stands for Alternative for Germany, but really AFD stands for assholes for Deutschland.
Well,
and she's one of them, and she's incredibly racist. And in fact,
incredible.
Wikipedia says Der Spiegel has described Anderson as an activist of the anti-Islam far-right Pegida Alliance. She's participated in street protests promoting immigration reform. I should have scare quotes around it.
Yeah, really. Wow. I bet that's not really reform.
She supported the Canada Convoy protests. In the European Parliament, she's a member of the Committee on Culture and Education, and most recently was appointed to the Special Committee on the COVID-19 pandemic. And in July 2022 session, she entered into the record a complaint that had been too much emphasis upon getting experimental gene therapy treatments into healthy people.
Okay,
that's who
but they weren't healthy; they were sick.
She's in Germany. She's in Europe. Nobody's paying attention. Probably half the people in Germany or more have no idea who she is, and even those who follow politics probably don't. But they know who AFD is.
Yeah,
very strong in the East, not so strong in the West. Didn't do well in the last set of elections, which was great. So she now comes to Canada, and she's visiting Canada. And so she's met by Canadian conservative members of parliament, MPs. who are happy to do so. And then they find out, oh, she's really a nut job.
Oh, one of those Germans.
So, people in Canada write, that they're concerned about things. The Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs had a tweet about this. They're very upset about this, that she is meeting with Canadians. We're deeply concerned by Conservative Party MPs meeting with her, a member of the far-right German AfD party known for Islamophobic and anti-immigrant views. We raised this directly. So the head of the Conservative Party said, no, we want nothing to do with her, and more or less made the Conservative MPs who were meeting with her apologize.
All right. Well, they did that anyway.
Canadians. Colin Carey is one of them. In a statement from the MPs who met with her for immediate release, February 23rd, Dean Allison, the Member of Parliament for Niagara West, Colin Carey, the Member of Parliament for Oshawa, and Leslyn Lewis, the Member of Parliament for Haldimand, Norfolk, released the following statement. It is, of course, not uncommon for MPs to meet with visiting elected officials from other countries. During a visit, we recently met with an elected representative of the European Parliament when she was in Canada. We were not aware of the views or associations of her and her political party. We do not share or endorse her views and strongly condemn any views that are racist or hateful. So Colin Carey tweets this and says, I profoundly regret attending a meeting without having sought the input of my staff and without having undertaken a fulsome vetting of the individuals, which is my usual practice. I alone own the mistake. I will do better.
All right. That is super Canadian.
Normally what happens is you make a mistake. Okay, fine. So she tweets this, and Christine Anderson picks up on it, the person in question, and tweets back, while you, Colin Carey, have absolutely no reason to regret having met with me, which you know perfectly well, by the way. I have every reason to regret having met with you, which I do, because I profoundly regret having wasted my time meeting with a sellout like you.
Wow. Okay. Well,
And then she
last word
gets rid of that tweet. And so, the whole story today is this back and forth about what happened.
I regret you.
Yes.
What about that?
Well, how about that? All
right.
So, sure. in this whole right-wing selling of COVID conspiracies, and of course today's big story is that the Department of Energy, in a very low confidence way, says maybe we don't really have enough information to decide about whether or not that was a lab leak.
Why the Department of Energy? One wonders.
One wonders that, and there's an answer for that.
Oh, well, what answer?
And the answer is COVID's dangerous. And anybody who was doing gain of function sort of studies really needs to do this in a biosecurity lab level 4, BSL 4 lab.
All right.
And labs are overseen by the Department of Energy. So they have a degree of expertise in looking at lab work. And that's why they were involved at all.
Yes. What, from nuclear experimentations? And
right. They have some expertise in some areas, but not necessarily all of the areas they would need to do this. And their own conclusions didn't change the view of the 6 other departments who said, no, we think it was more likely a natural wet market problem. Truth is, we don't know and we'll never know. But the fact that it's such a low confidence discussion means we really don't know, but we just found this new stuff that we just thought we would tell you about. And the problem is that people like Christine Anderson pick up on that and say, oh, look, there's proof from the U.S. government that it was a lab leak. It's the Chinese. You should all hate Chinese.
Right. Well, you already do, so no work for you. Not you, Greg, but Hans Christine Anderson over here.
Right.
That's
the thing, but wait, this whole thing sparked my interest. And said, who is this Christine Anderson person? This is a terrible situation that she should be meeting with people in the first place. So I just, Googled the name.
All right. I mean, the
and
Canadians
the stuff
could have done
starts
this.
coming up in German, but the first article that comes up was from 2019 from the Frankfurter New Press.
Frankfurter.
Okay. And I'm hungry too now. But CV of the AfD top candidate, this is a 2019 article, raises questions. AfD district chairwoman Christine Anderson will most certainly move into the European Parliament. And she did, and she's now part of that COVID committee. But now there's doubts about her CV. And who's bringing them up? Her brother.
Oh, well.
The brother accuses his sister of massively falsifying her CV and a few other ugly things, including child abduction.
Wow. Did she say
and
she had been abducted?
This is a George Santos clone. What is going on here?
I guess that's just no barrier to entry in those parties.
Right. There's nothing to it. She said, I'm shocked by my brother's behavior.
Oh, right. Well, that's it. Like she did with this Canadian. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm embarrassed by you. That's just, I guess, the whole shtick. Maybe the
50-year-old has thick folders with documents with her. The documents confirm a large part of their account, but not everything, and therefore a few inconsistencies remain. Christine Anderson explains the gaps with her dramatic flight from the United States, and more on that.
Dramatic flight.
The main sticking point is whether or not she completed her business studies in California. In the CV, Christine Anderson writes she studied economics during her 6-year stay in the U.S., and in her application speech at the party conference, she reported she completed her studies. But at the same time, she was employed. In fact, she was employed as a salesperson for women's outerwear. And then she went on to claim that she ran a company.
Oh, well, that probably wasn't really true, but okay.
Right. Associate's degree alone doesn't count as a college degree. And Anderson admitted that her degree was not the same as the bachelor's degree you get in Germany. There are sticklers about that.
Yeah, also, but
there were German politicians who had to resign because they falsified a paper back in college. I mean, they're really sticklers.
Well, there was a time when people cared about that sort of thing, but now something, and we're battling some. So she said she worked 6 years on an associate's degree.
Yeah. So she says she was the managing director in America of the Broadway company in Victoria's Secret.
What?
In fact, she's referred to herself as the manager and proprietress
of Victoria's Secret. That's actually a fairly famous brand.
Pretty funny. And then the next line in this German translation here is, anybody who's ever been to the U.S. knows that almost every salesperson there calls themselves a manager.
Oh, that could be. That's light resume inflation. Saying you're the owner of the company is
right. It's just one of those things when you start peeling the onion and you go down and you look a little more, you find out stuff that you didn't know. So so she's sort of a nutcase.
Yeah,
and she lies about her resume. She gets elected in Germany to the AfD. She winds up in the European Parliament. Sure. I think they sort of caucus with the French far right of Marie Le Pen.
Probably, yes.
I think that's what our French correspondents from Daily Kos are telling me, the people who comment in my...
in French. And you don't know for sure whether they're...
but, it's just it's all part of a world crazy movement. And so, you start peeling the onion and you find, I got this link, I got that link, I recognize this, I've heard of that. Mm-hmm. Oh, she's part of that party. Oh, it's the Marie Le Pen branch of the European Union.
This is the right-wing global network to defeat globalism.
Something like that, yes.
So,
also mRNA.
And make up your own resume.
It's the anti-mRNA alliance.
Wow. AMRNA. I could probably pronounce that as a... Well, anyway, so that's interesting. They make up their resumes. Also, isn't the actual owner of Victoria's Secret somebody who's fairly famous for being that? I don't, have the name on the tip of my tongue, but I think that's a well-known personage. But maybe not in Germany.
Something about...
still.
letting some non-fulsome character manage all his money.
Mm-hmm.
Jeffrey Epstein or something like that.
Yes, right. Yeah, it was such a person too. So it's a hell of a company to choose. But maybe she did that in 2019. What do you say? Before she knew that? I don't know.
Anyway,
none of it holds together. That's
people are odd. And,
all you need to know.
The thing is that if you're a member of Congress, let's say, I don't know that much about members of Parliament, but if you're a member of Congress, you have a staff, and your staff's supposed to vet these people. And I get that you can make an error, but you don't need to, because. Like, if you said, well, I accidentally met with somebody from the Nazi Party and I regret that my staff didn't vet them before I did. What part about being part of the Nazi Party did you have to have vetted before you decided it was okay to meet with them?
I don't know.
This is AfD we're talking about. Why are you meeting with them?
Yeah. I mean, that should be well known by now.
Nobody should meet with them.
Yeah,
why are you
who
meeting
knows?
with Marie Le Pen's party? What excuse can you possibly come up with that justifies why you would do that?
Don't know. Just, confusion about, I mean, I guess if you're, I don't know, making excuses for the Canadians that they don't need. They already apologized, so they don't need any excuses.
Well,
But I guess if you're coming as a member
Canadians,
of the
of course, they
European
apologize.
Parliament, right? I mean,
They're nice people.
They'd do that even if they didn't do anything.
They do that in Minnesota. They're very nice people, but it doesn't necessarily answer everything. The good news about all of this, however, is that the head of the Conservative Party said this is not acceptable. So that's really
good.
The
Good
takeaway
job,
that I'll take
Canada.
from this. That is
They're
a good job.
good neighbors. Well done. Leslie Wexner is the name of the guy I was thinking.
Yeah.
Of. And he was,
And I think he has Epstein.
You're right. I believe he does.
Connections.
Did, I don't know. One of the two of them at least is dead. We know that, but I don't know whether Wexner, he's, older guy. He may still be around. But,
Right.
but
So, by the way,
whole...
to finish up on your Dilbert story.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Hearst this morning pulled his comic. It's now not in our local edition. And by the way, for those of you following this saga, the Sunday comics, which are the colored versions that come in a separate, section,
right,
are often printed and stored weeks in advance. So even though you could pull the Dilbert from tomorrow's edition of USA Today and its network, Hearst Network, and a bunch of other networks, and then independents like the Washington Post and the LA Times, so you still might get the Sunday comic for the next few weeks until it's...
So throw out your comics, everybody.
Until the middle of March, and when the supply of Dilbert Sunday cartoons finally runs out.
All right. Well, stay the hell away from Dilbert cartoons, I guess. Leslie Wexner, by the way, still alive, 85 years old and still kicking, but not hanging out with the now dead Jeffrey Epstein, thankfully.
Right. So
there's
a bunch of stuff also happening. In addition, talking about some recent. It's interesting because there's the Dilbert thing feeds into this whole thing about the woke culture, but you sort of get the feeling, especially with Scott Adams, that this whole cancel thing and woke stuff has sort of peaked and is now declining. It's really hard to keep up the momentum about how awful this is when somebody who actually is canceled actually deserves it.
Yeah, I mean, it helps illustrate for people who are, going on about their normal daily business and don't know anything about it and don't care very much about whatever woke thing people complain, I heard about it, whatever, and then they see something, there's something that rises to their, to the level where it gets their attention, and they say, yeah, that is bad, though. So he should be dropped. What's wrong with this?
It's very difficult to define woke, but essentially there's sort of two subgroups where it's thrown around a lot by white people. One is if you're talking about anybody black, and that's the way Scott Adams did it, and that's partly what got him in trouble. But the other, perhaps slightly more benign, but still in its own way toxic way of using woke is to simply say, woke is anything that suggests change.
Yeah, more or less.
And I hate change. And I'm going to fight against change. And if you're trying to change things, you must be woke.
Yes, unless it's my kind of change, in which case it's awesome.
In which case it's not change at all, really.
Oh, well, yeah, sometimes I think that. Unless it's, change like we should be able to shoot anybody we don't. Well, that's not change either, is it?
So,
okay, you're right.
As you know, and we sort of touched on it, even though I don't want to dwell on it, the whole COVID thing was politicized.
Yes. And
made toxic. And now what's happening is the train disaster in East Palestine.
Yes.
Is being made toxic.
It was,
I'm going to start maybe
toxic,
with David Corn.
Okay.
David Corn has a newsletter from Mother Jones about this. The GOP plays the race card with a train wreck.
Yes.
Shortly before the midterm elections, I was reviewing the statements of J.D. Vance, the Ohio Republican who would soon win a Senate seat, and I discovered he'd concocted a populist brew blending working-class resentment and white racial grievance. In various interviews, Vance contended that unidentified elite plutocrats were conspiring with the woke crowd, whoever they were, to shut up middle America.
Yeah, shut up.
Shut up, middle
you guys.
America. Stop meeting with AFD people. He claimed these nefarious and powerful interests used false accusations of racism to prevent people, white people that is, from complaining about the economic hardship they face. In his narrative, there was no legitimate debate about race in America. Instead, unnamed fat cats brand patriotic American racists to preserve their own riches and to keep legions of hardworking but struggling white Americans under heel. Critical race theory, in his view, was a bludgeon deployed to control people, and white privilege was a lie used to silence working-class Americans.
Okay. That's interesting. It's the flip side of, we discovered that economic anxiety is actually racism.
Yeah, exactly. Here's what the elites do. When they say those people are white privileged, they shut them up. Mm-hmm. You're unhappy about your job being shipped overseas? You're worried about a lawless southern border? White privilege, shut up. Don't complain. That's his view, his pitch. Right? Harvard. That's his shtick. So
Mr.
it's
Harvard.
demagoguery, David Korn writes, conflating legitimate concerns about economic power with racist paranoia, and that's where that economic anxiety stuff came up with. Mm-hmm. It goes beyond the usual crash GOP playbook of waving the racism card, instead fusing toxic culture wars to bread and butter issues. I don't know if the sly maneuver was responsible for Vance's Senate victory. Probably not. I mean, Ohio is Ohio.
For his
but it sure didn't hurt, he writes. And in the days since the horrific train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, Republicans and right-wingers have been beating this drum, and then goes on to point out Tucker Carlson, who made it clear 11 days after the accident. He said on his show, and I quote, "East Palestine is overwhelmingly white and it's politically conservative. That shouldn't be relevant, but as you're about to hear, it very much is. If this happened to the rich or the favored poor, it'd be the lead of every story, but nobody's talking about it because it's poor and white."
Except that everybody's talking about it. It's kind of weird.
Except that. There's a lot of except that. And he found, Greg Sargent found other examples. We'll talk about that after the break.
All right. Well, plenty of people are talking about it, but yes, they are hoping to score some points out of this. And then they were mad because he went to Ukraine instead of coming to see them. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. By the way, are you working on your big old good computer now, Greg?
I am.
All right,
I got it
congratulations.
back last night.
Fantastic.
And I spent several hours reconstituting it. I had to, reload everything from the backup disk.
But it was there.
But it was there.
Good.
And, of course, when you do that, they had updated the operating system, and that meant that none of the passwords were there. Like if I wanted to sign on to Skype to talk to you, it would say, well, who are you?
Right.
Well, here's who I am. Okay, fine. We'll let you on.
Is.
And then you go on, and you find like none of your previous conversations are there.
Yeah, oh boy.
Well, then you have to contact Microsoft and say, why is that? Well, try signing on with a different email.
What?
Oh,
why?
Okay.
All right.
Or you can give us your number. Wait a minute. What do you mean give you my number? This is Skype. There is no number.
Oh. Well, yeah, that too.
Oh, well, just, give us your email, and we'll send you a code that'll allow you to at least look and see what's going on.
Give us a number of your
and
dollars.
I looked, and I said, okay, fine. There are 2 emails. Let me sign on with the other one. And, there's David's feed.
Hey, all right.
With all the stuff we did from the other day.
Mopping my brow.
But I had to do that for every single program.
Oh, yes.
Every single program, whether it's Photoshop or whether it's the Microsoft Office suite or, little programs I use to do stuff. You have to do it with everyone and sort of update it. And now I have a new operating system I didn't ask for. And I have to go back and look at my legacy programs, my apps, and make sure they still work. And it just takes hours.
Well,
I have it. It's almost ready, but it's sure faster than the one I was using.
Okay, well, that's good. And faster is gooder, as they say. When you don't know what
I don't have any garbage pails or refrigerator doors slamming, but that's my domestic story for today. I don't have the washing machine going. Abby was barking, but just before the show, so she's still around.
Got it all out.
People were wondering. We're trying to be careful about managing her so that she doesn't get on the show too often. But she's a dog, so you can't negotiate with her.
I have not yet Googled her. I don't know what her political affiliations are. I assume she's friendly with you, so there's got to be something. But for all I know, 6 years in Germany.
I have to tell you just right off the bat, and this is full disclosure, she really dislikes squirrels.
Well, yes.
So if you're from the American Squirrel Party, you're not going to like what you find when you Google Abby.
Well, yeah, and this
and
is
it may
the sort
not
of
be
thing
safe
that
for
you
work.
could say it might be she's from a different time when dogs and squirrels did not get along, and sometimes you put some context to this, but it's time to get past that, Abby. We need to work together with the squirrel community. All right.
So back to David.
Maybe she really does like squirrels.
Maybe she does, but I don't think so.
And has a weird way of showing it. Okay.
Very odd, yes. So David Corn points out Donald Trump went there recently when Trump visited East Palestine a few days ago and handed out red MAGA hats.
And
they should be MATA hats, right? Make America Toxic Again.
It's
like he got rid of all the regulations that
what's his doing?
We're trying to protect trains from accidents. But he proclaimed its residents were victims of a betrayal. Yeah. He didn't explicitly say this was due to anti-white racism, but his use of that word synced up with the powers that be hate the white people narrative of Carlson, Vance, and others. All of this is probably effective for Republicans because Trump is right in one sense. Working Americans have long been betrayed by corporate America and its handmaids in local, state, and federal government. But, that's usually Republicans.
Very often. But they somehow disguise it very well. And I don't know what they thought they were going to get out of these guys. But, all right, yeah. So they did everything they could to make it sound like it was everybody else's fault but their own. And,
right. And so the question on the table really is, how well does that work? It works within their own audience, which is not the same thing as it works writ large. East Palestine is located in a part of Ohio that basically is a 90% Trump area. Mm-hmm. So it's going to work there.
Yes.
And somebody like Donald Trump is going to be welcomed a lot more vigorously than, let's say, a Pete Buttigieg. Mm-hmm. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation that goes on. One of the funnier ones was James Comer, who's head of the House Oversight Committee.
Oh, yes, right, that guy.
And, some of the people in Congress were getting on Buttigieg's case because the Department of Transportation didn't send the National Transportation Safety Board out there soon enough.
Well, you mean, all right, not soon enough after the accident?
After the accident.
Okay.
Well, they were out there almost immediately, number one. But number two, Pete Buttigieg wrote back saying, I'm really disappointed that the head of the House Oversight Committee doesn't understand that NTSB is a separate agency and not part of the Department of Transportation.
Oh, well, might have been a good guess. You might have Googled it.
It's your job and all to know these things, and you don't know these things, and that's really too bad. But we'll do our best to work together with NTSB and get stuff done.
Right. I'm very sorry that Pete Buttigieg didn't send the Red Cross quickly enough.
In an earlier era, stuff like that would be so embarrassing that you'd just resign.
Yes.
And never want anybody to talk to you again. But this is 2023, and there is no shame in the Republican Party. So they don't care that they're completely ignorant.
I guess not.
In positions where they're supposed to be knowledgeable about this stuff.
Transportation thing, too. I guess if you said, hey, do you think the NTSB is under the Department of Transportation?
Well, it's just one of those things. Look, if you're going to lie about election results, you'll lie about everything.
I guess that's true too.
And the theme of the show, starting from that Canadian German hookup there, was like lying.
Yeah, and
lie through their
curable
teeth,
by
and they're not gonna
Googling.
let something like this bother them in the least.
Yes, but I guess it should be curable by some search engine that doesn't track you as much. But Google is the shortcut for that.
Again, the question is, how is it going to play to the general public writ large? And that's a completely different conversation than whether or not it's going to play to the Republican Party. Vance may see himself as a rising star in the Republican Party, but then again, Blake Masters probably does too.
Yes, right. Carrie Lake, she thinks she's president.
Sarah Palin. I mean, there's a lot of people who just think they're stars, who basically aren't.
She still does think she's a star, I think. Huh. That's weird.
Anyway, back in the real world, here's a piece from the Detroit Free Press, sort of kind of emphasizing that point. Michigan Republican Party is now reliant on just 2 donor families, records show.
Yeah, well, not surprising. We spent a lot of time last week talking about exactly how crazy they've gone.
Troy attorney Linda Orland said she was drawn to the Michigan Republican Party because she believes in hard work, entrepreneurship, and a tax climate supportive of small business. Between 2007 and 2013, Orleans gave the state party 8 checks totaling $80,000, record show, but nothing since. I just think they lost their soul, who said the party has shifted to the extreme right, is not focused on solving problems, and increasingly spouses an anti-woman philosophy. The more I saw it, the more I was disenchanted with the direction of the party, and she's not alone. A Detroit Free Press analysis of state campaign finance records found the Michigan Republican Party has seen such a drop-off in its donor base that 58% of the money it raised from individual donors came from just 2 sources.
Wow.
Ron Weiser, who was the former head of the Republican Party there, and the DeVos family.
Oh,
that's it. Those are the donors. Please them, you're in. Otherwise, you're not.
I guess that's kind of something. I think the founders were a little wary of that sort of thing. But,
so Christine Karama, who's now the head of the GOP in Michigan, says, well, the problem with our party is that we're too beholden to these 2 donors. So first, she antagonizes everybody who's not Weiser and DeVos.
Yeah, then.
And then she antagonizes Weiser and DeVos. Explain to me how this is a winning move. She takes control of a party that's essentially broke.
Yeah.
For the first time, the party, according to the story, had to charge convention attendees $50 to $75 to get in. And you may recall, we covered this on the show, officials had to rush delegates to the exits after the final ballot because the rental time was over.
We're on a tight budget.
They were having their convention, and the winner of who was going to be head of the Republican Party didn't pass on the first ballot.
Right.
So they needed to have a couple of other ballots, but they're running out of time because it's like they're renting the place by the hour.
Yeah.
It's a turnkey rental. And so I have to finish up because you have to elect me because we have to be out of here in 5 minutes.
Right. Or else we're going to have to charge all the delegates another $50.
But of course you have to understand our entire reason for being is to tell people how corrupt parties are and how elections are rigged. Now hurry up and get this done. Yeah. We have 3 minutes.
Right. Everybody vote very quickly. And
no mistakes will be made.
The whole thing has been paid for by 2 billionaires. Wow. Okay.
Anyway, this has been happening since 2018 when the Tea Party emerged, but it's reaching epic proportions here, actually critical proportions. And it's not clear they're going to have the money to be
amazing statistic. 58%.
Meanwhile, Elise Slotkin's going to be declaring herself candidate for the Senate race.
All righty, go ahead.
And probably will clear the field. I don't think Jocelyn Benson will run. Maybe she will, but Democrats have a pretty strong chance of keeping that seat.
All right.
Just so everybody knows.
Well, good. We should.
You hate to say it's a done deal. It's not a done deal. But you have a party that's collapsing on the one hand, and you have strong candidates on the other, and so one party's in better position.
Are we talking about Gillibrand's seat?
That she's New York.
Yeah.
No, we're talking about Michigan.
Oh, you said. I thought you said. Oh, I thought
Slotkin.
Yeah. Okay. I'm thinking of the other. on the other side and the other lunatic.
The Democrat Alyssa Slotkin.
Yes, okay.
Announcing my run to be Michigan's next U.S. Senator, right. She said in the last hour.
Oh, I don't know. For some reason, I was thinking in New York for some reason, but okay.
That's
who am I thinking of? The
Elise Stefanik.
Yes,
in that case.
The other S. Are they both ES?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's
Alyssa Slotkin and somebody Stefanik.
Well, you'd hate to confuse anybody with what's it? Stefanik. I don't even know. All right. Okay. I thought she was declaring for the, and it may be. And then I was like, well, wait a second. Why would she be clearing the... All right. That's the wrong field she's clearing. Something's wrong. I'm in the wrong place. What's going on? Okay. Thank you. Very good. Boy, that's annoying. I would hate to have those initials and be confused that way. Sorry.
So, let's see what else we have here. Some of the cartoonists who are handling the Dilbert situation.
Oh?
Have done a bang-up job. I've sent them to you.
Oh.
You can't really see them
on
a podcast. So
you can't. But I can
David
because... Can. All right. Over the top. There they are. Oh, everybody taking a shot at... It's not hard to draw Dilbert, I don't think.
Right.
And they're giving it their best shot. Nice. Okay.
Yeah. It's always fun to watch cartoonists mimic each other's styles.
Yeah.
And the good ones can do it really well.
Yep. So let's see. There's one of Dilbert's head, his hair standing up on end and exploding in a big...
nuclear bomb exploding, which I think is perfect.
Is this one? No, that's attached to your... Then there's the other one. The boss confronting Dilbert, and Dilbert is shirtless but his tie is on somehow.
Well, his normal tie that's curled.
Shirtless and shaved head, and it has a white power written or tattooed on his chest, and has a Nazi swastika coffee mug and some tattoos. And the boss is saying, Dilbert, can you come to my office for a second? All right. These things happen. Sure. Well done. Who's that one? I'll have to enlarge it to see. Infinite Guff is the cartoonist, or someone who at least uses perhaps Twitter at Infinite Guff. I'll look up who that is.
Right. Meanwhile, Fox News continues to have issues. As you know, we covered last week the fact that the Dominion suit has opened up the cupboard, and everybody now knows with proof in writing that Fox News basically lies about everything. And when you have a news organization that lies about everything, they're a propaganda outlet. They're not a news outlet. And everybody knows. And it's just,
everybody knows.
One of those things you internalize and just say, oh, it's Fox News, the liars.
Yeah.
So Howard Kurtz, who works for Fox News, said he's been barred by Fox from covering the defamation lawsuit filed by Dominion Voting Systems, a decision he said he strongly disagrees with.
All right.
But there's nothing he can do about it.
But he said he was blocked. That's interesting. I bet he's in trouble for going on the air and announcing that he's blocked.
He probably said superb owl, too.
Yeah, that's true. And there's some sort of
you know what happens to
lawsuit.
People who say superb owl?
Yeah, I don't know exactly.
Without permission.
Lawsuit of some kind, I guess. But, all right, so that's interesting. I wonder if he's got an eye on bailing and surviving as a mainstream media figure as Fox collapses. I mean, it was a bad move for him to go to Fox in the first place, but kind of was where he belonged because it's a bit of a joker, but all right. Interesting. I'm glad that he's fessed up to that.
So, Never Trumper, and one of my favorites, which doesn't mean I agree with him about everything, but at least he, recognizes that Die Hard is indeed a Christmas movie. Tom Nichols, writing in The Atlantic, says, the war in Ukraine is the end of a world. A shroud is setting over the dreams many of us had at the end of the 20th century. And he writes in part, I grieve for the innocent people of Ukraine, for the dead and for the survivors. I grieve for the elderly who have had to live through the brutality of the Nazis and Soviets and now the Russians. And I grieve, too, for the Russians. I care not one bit for Putin. But I grieve for the young men who have been used as cannon meat, for children whose fathers have been dragooned into the service of a dictator. And finally, I grieve for the end of a world I knew for most of my adult life. I've lived through two eras. One, an age of undeclared war between two ideological foes that threaten instant destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. I'm old enough to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis in school. The next, a time of increasing freedom and global integration. That was a time that people actually had fallout shelters.
Yes.
This second
And
world
that would work.
of increasing freedom and global integration was full of chaos, but grounded in hope. The Soviet collapse didn't mean the end of war or of dictatorships, but after 1991, time seemed to be on the side of peace and democracy if only we could summon the will and find the leadership to build on heroic triumphs over Nazism and communism. And he's saying, it just can't be naive about that anymore.
Yeah, and with Nazism right back where we started.
Ronald Reagan didn't end that threat forever. Who knew?
Oh, well.
So then, among other things, Tucker Carlson, who's pro-Russia, took issue with what Tom Nichols wrote, and there's a screenshot caption here of Carlson showing Nichols on Fox News, and Nichols tweeted this and said, okay, my kid thought it was pretty funny that Tucker Carlson just called me a parasite who's never achieved anything. This was so funny and over the top, but she seriously asked me if it was a deep fake or a parody, but no, it wasn't. But make no mistake, the rest of the segment is weapons-grade pro-Kremlin fentanyl.
Okay,
hideous propaganda. Totally pro-Russia. So,
yes.
Again, just so you know, this Fox News that won't allow Howard Kurtz to talk about the Dominion Suite not only lies about everything and isn't a news outlet, but Carlson is a pro-Russian, pro-white propagandist, just pure and simple. Doesn't deny it, says I'm not a journalist, so he can't sue me for libel.
Right.
Just my opinion.
He has asked that question.
I'm not a news person.
The first one. Why isn't it we won't believe that Putin is good here? Okay. I mean.
So it continues.
We understand you now.
And just saying it continues in a big way.
Yeah.
But what comes around goes around. And just to illustrate that is my last piece from today, and I have this from the Pundit Roundup from CNN. 7 months after he left office, Britain is still reeling from Boris Johnson. Wonder why they call him the British Trump.
Wasn't just the hair.
Despite being forced from office in disgrace and presiding over a massive decline in support for himself and his party, Johnson's still attempting to influence government policy. His supporters say his interventions are the Conservatives' last hope of saving the party from decimation, and his critics think he's not only undermining current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, but by reminding voters, with many of whom he's unpopular, of his existence, he's damaging his party's electoral prospects. Does that sound familiar?
Yes. It's just kind of funny.
That's why they call him
your very existence is damaging our prospects. Right. Yeah. Well, that's happening here, too, yes. And maybe if we started calling Trump the American Boris Johnson, maybe he'd get it.
Right. So Johnson negotiated and signed the Brexit deal. And now Rishi Sunak is attempting to negotiate an agreement with the EU to fix part of the 2019 Brexit deal. And it's unclear whether Boris Johnson is going to try to undermine him and come out against that. So that's what's happening in the UK this week. And just, sort of interesting.
Vegetables.
I thought we, buried you and stuck a stake in your heart and shot you with a silver bullet and, put salt in the grave. And here you are, you're back. What is going on here?
Yeah, how come and why no media coverage of why won't he shut up and go away and just go walking in the woods and leave the rest of us alone already?
Meanwhile, again, back in the real world, here's a YouGov The Economist poll. For the U.S., in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, who do you sympathize with more? Registered voters, total registered voters. Not Democrats, not GOP, not Indies, which are broken out separately, but registered voters, 75% sympathize with Ukraine, 5% sympathize with Russia. So Tucker Carlson's talking to the 5% when he does these rants, and neither 15.
Okay.
Democrats
could be
is
talking
84,
to them.
And the GOP is 67-8.
Huh. So I don't know who he's talking to. I mean,
interestingly,
a very small number.
67% of the GOP sympathize with Ukraine. Of independents, 61% do. So the GOP is more pro-Ukraine than independents.
Oh.
And all of them are
pro-Ukraine.
Passes the Hastert rule. And the market for pro-Russia propaganda, the way Tucker Carlson pushes it, is pretty small. I just don't get it. I don't get what they're doing.
Yeah,
I can understand it if it's like, well, 45% of the population, think this way. And if we get all of them, we have a huge advantage over the split, network news that everybody else goes to, because we get 45%. That one gets 14. That one gets 27. That one gets 33. That one gets 2. We dominate everybody.
Right.
But if your entire group that you're trying to aim at is 8% of the population, why? You're not even going to get all of them.
Yeah.
Most of them are going to try to get their news from, Breitbart or One American News or Newsmax or whatever.
Yeah, although
or the My Pillow guy. I don't understand. I do not understand.
I don't know. I don't either. I don't think that. I guess you could say, well, payoffs of some kind, money, but it's hard to imagine them having enough money to make Rupert Murdoch, say, yeah, I should just tank the whole place for this cash. But I don't know what his finances really are. I don't know. That's odd. It certainly makes no sense absent some sort of, payment under the table or something we don't know about, except if could he just be professionally contrarian? I don't think that's something he wants to do.
I don't know. So when Kevin McCarthy makes a decision to allow Tucker Carlson to have access
to
these videos from the January 6th insurrection. There's a number of reasons why that's a bad idea.
Yes.
But, it's just interesting to, again, remind yourself of exactly who Kevin McCarthy is allowing access to the videos.
That's true, too. Not just a jerk, but
what they're doing. It's not just that he's a loudmouth, crazy uncle that you have to deal with at Thanksgiving. This is a Father Coughlin pro-Russian, pro-white, racist, just as much as Dilbert, guy who's pushing this.
Yeah.
And,
that's the bottom line
just keep in mind of who it is. And the fact that McCarthy's okay with this, and with people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, is just, a daily embarrassment.
Yeah. You might say, well, they got him over a barrel, but I think that even if he wasn't over a barrel, he'd just still be like, yeah,
if he were someone else,
guys.
He wouldn't be doing it. He's just
if he was someone
else,
else,
weak-kneed, wuss of a terrible leader. And
he's
no
him.
other explanation.
Yeah,
skilled people find their way out of this box, but he's not only painted himself in the corner, he bought the paint and planned it out.
Mm-hmm. Right, and he's painting it himself like Bob Ross. Can't wait to get himself in this corner. Look at me in this happy little corner right here. I'm enjoying it. I'm not even trying to paint my way out. All right. Well, he's terrible.
Is Bob Ross the guy that paints happy trees?
Yeah. Right. He could help him get out of there with his techniques. But no, it's not going to happen. Also, I think he's dead. But,
The trees are still happy, though. They live a long time.
They were made happy and they stayed happy. All right. Well, that is interesting stuff that, Kevin McCarthy can't solve this for himself. The handing over of the tapes to Tucker Carlson, to anyone, even a whole network, would still be wrong and problematic, as others are pointing out. And I think there was news over the weekend that the other news networks are now protesting / preparing to sue and demanding that they ought to have the same access as
in the
Fox.
Same time frame. They have to include that in the suit.
Mm-hmm.
Carlson gets to prepare the propaganda first, and then the news outlets get it. That's the way this is working. That's crazy stuff.
Yeah. So they are protesting and they are speaking up and trying to get a hold of. I don't know whether they're going to succeed, and I don't know whether a judge telling them that they have to turn the footage over to them it's going to mean anything either, because the way they appeal things, it could take forever. And so, in all likelihood, Tucker Carlson will just go plowing ahead. And what they need is a temporary restraining order to prevent Carlson's people from reviewing the tapes. But I think it's probably too late. Mm. And also, they were going to lie about what was on the tapes anyway, so it doesn't matter a great deal. They may never review the tapes. They'll just say what they were going to say and tell us that the tapes prove it. And it'll be 2 years before we find out the tapes do not prove it. So.
Right. So that's my segment for today, and
okay.
I just want to let you know I can still hear. That's kind of a minor miracle, because when I put on the earphones, the sound was so loud that, The windows blew out in the basement here.
Wow. Well, sorry to hear that. But, okay, good. Yeah, watch your hearing health.
What?
Right. Exactly. So send that check right away. You agreed. I don't know. Yeah, if you didn't hear that part. Okay. Well, thanks, Greg. And, turn the volume down, and we'll catch up with you on Wednesday.
And some of the minor adjustments you have to make along the way. But we're good at that. Do not try this at home just because David and I do.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, because also we won't hear you unless you call our number. And Greg lost it over the weekend when he changed operating systems. Yeah, I guess that's in everybody's future eventually.
Yeah, sooner or later.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, take care, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Very good. Okay, and we'll turn our attention to some of the other stories, but of course our break is coming up within minutes, so I guess we can't get too far into it. I'll just remind everybody, it was the Washington Post that I had read. Anumita Kaur, is that Kaur? K-A-U-R? I don't know how she pronounces her last name. Hey, I don't know how she pronounces her first name, but I gave it a shot. She's the one who wrote the piece for the Washington Post. News outlets demand release of January 6th footage given to Tucker Carlson. And perhaps in a minute or so before we run the music, we can find out what they mean by demand. Scores of news organizations, and if you didn't find out in school what a score is, that's 20. So several 20s of news organizations, including the Washington Post, on Friday demanded congressional leaders release a trove of surveillance footage from the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol that the House Speaker provided exclusively to Fox News host Tucker Carlson, who has downplayed the violence. And then, of course, also said originally, we know thanks to the Dominion suit, that people who were downplaying the violence were crazy idiots, but whatever. Attorney Charles Tobin sent a letter on behalf of CBS News, CNN, Politico, ProPublica, ABC, Axios, Advance, this is starting to look like it was alphabetical order, but I guess it's not, Scripps, the Los Angeles Times, and Gannett, arguing that the footage should be available to other groups as well. Doesn't that sound interesting to you? I think so. Here's the music that lets us know we have just 30 seconds before we jump out into the break. Without full public access, they said, to the complete historical record, there is concern that an ideologically based narrative of an already polarizing event will take hold in the public consciousness, with destabilizing risks to the legitimacy of Congress, the Capitol Police, and the various federal investigations and prosecutions of January 6th crimes, the letter stated. All right, well written. I think the narrative is already inscribed on that, but they can try. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Would you like to hear the rest of this article? It's not very long, so we can sum things up nicely and see if there's any other detail we need to uncover. But this I thought was interesting. McCarthy has remained silent about the footage, and again, we're talking about the January 6th security camera footage from the Capitol Police that was released in its entirety. Raw film of every camera everywhere on Capitol Hill on January 6th. So you can see, and if you're wondering, like, well, why would that be exculpatory at all? I assume that there are extended periods of time during which one or another camera somewhere on Capitol Hill will show virtually nothing or nothing of concern going on while it's filming. I mean, for some period of time, some of these cameras showed members of Congress and staff going about their business as though nothing were going on, because at the time nothing was going on. Then there will also be footage somewhere, I'm sure, of areas of the Capitol after the perimeter or after the building itself had been breached, where there was no one perpetrating any sort of violence or vandalism, because they were all in some other portion of the Capitol perpetrating violence and vandalism there. Or perhaps there will even be the odd item on surveillance video wherein a police officer is knocked to the ground by one protester and helped back to their feet by some other protester. And therefore, it's just normal tourism, so far as normal tourism involves knocking police officers to their feet. But, I mean, what they hope to do with it, I don't really know exactly. But I guess if you slice and dice the video enough, you can construct a totally different narrative if you want to. But I mean, we all kind of did see on television, the regular TV, not closed circuit TV, what was happening and who was doing it. And the chance to rewrite the narrative, I think, is long gone. But I guess for the 8% or so of the party loyalists who believe, I don't know, for some reason are pro-Russia in this conflict, in the Ukraine war, then I guess, those would be the people susceptible to having the narrative rewritten on the January 6th thing. Anyway, McCarthy, it says, has remained silent about the footage and has not spoken publicly or responded to questions about the release, and that's because he has his foot in his mouth this whole time, which was first reported by Axios. Not the foot, but the release of the footage. Hey, footage. That's interesting. All right. Well, it doesn't mean anything. His office did not respond to a request for comment. Carlson has repeatedly cast doubt on official accounts of what happened on January 6th and has claimed it was a false flag operation. And I guess he could show, for instance, all the people carrying Trump flags and saying, well, that's not the American flag. That's a false flag. So therefore it is a false flag operation. McCarthy's decision to provide the video to Carlson also raised questions, or rather concerns, as to whether Capitol Police will need to change the location of security cameras. That is one question that arises from it. And the other is, what the hell are you doing? And why would you give it to one network? And why would you give it to one person at one network? And why would you give it to the person who's an avowed liar about this and so many other related subjects? But okay. Capitol Police will need to change the location of security cameras, probably. So, that's not, it's costly, probably good practice anyway, but maybe because of the release of these things, we don't know. Some members of the House questioned why the Speaker would grant the content to a Fox News host who has promoted baseless accusations about the attack. The January 6th attack led to the largest criminal investigation in U.S. history, with more than 930 people federally charged so far, the Post previously reported. 5 people died as a result of the violence, and more than 100 members of law enforcement were injured by the mob, many of whom wielded bear spray, baseball bats, and other weapons. So, I don't know. I guess we'll see fairly soon what comes of the filing. Now I can't even remember. I just read it a few minutes ago. What did they do? They sent a letter on behalf of us. So there's no suit filed and nobody filing a temporary restraining order yet. And I guess it's possible that they may say, the fact is that Carlson will, he's a pretty dedicated partisan and put his people on it right away. And they likely will have what they need to attempt to rewrite the narrative on January 6th before we even get our temporary restraining order filed, but our motion filed. But you probably should still be doing it. Whatever. I mean, it wouldn't hurt in the PR battle, but I'm surprised not to see that having been announced yet, or at least not in this article. And maybe it's announced elsewhere in another article. We can look around and check. But all right. There's some interesting other linked articles at the bottom of this piece, and might be of some interest, although I think Greg really kind of covered what was going on, but I wonder whether there's additional information to be had from how a small-town train derailment erupted into a culture battle, someone attempting to lay out a roadmap as to how that actually happened. I think we probably all have a pretty good instinctive understanding of how that happened, but if you were interested in a exposition on it from Washington Post writers, Tulusi Olorunipa, I'm having trouble with the name. Justine McDaniel. Any name could give you trouble. And Ian Duncan. Your eyes as an English speaker are trained for certain. Others, I'm doing my best. And with 2 seconds of preparation off air, I probably could give you a nice, smooth pronunciation of everybody's name. But there we have it. So it might be interesting to read their view of how this politicizing of the train wreck came about. But like I said, I think we all have a pretty good understanding and background of it. So we may come back to it if we want more detail and find ourselves at a loss for other things to discuss. But I can't see how that's likely to happen. All right. Let's see. Plenty of suggestions from others about stories that we ought to include, and perhaps we'll take their advice on it. But while we're talking about the contributions of others, let me add the names of a few more people who have made contributions to others, and those others are us, the ones bringing you the show. Jonathan Stotman, a new supporter via Patreon, and returning and boosting contributor Matthew Kazesis. Do we have the last name correct? I probably should have asked you for a pronunciation guide, but apparently longtime supporter who, like many of you, and this is probably something everybody should be checking once in a while, longtime supporter who signed up with Patreon, gave them all the requisite information about credit cards, etc., and then routinely, as your credit cards get replaced, you're sent replacements by your credit card company just because the card expires or whatever. And surprisingly, there are still people, you would think for people who are built on sort of the internet credit card charging model, that they'd be more vigilant about it, but apparently not, and maybe that's a good thing. It's at any rate, sometimes your card expires and you don't even know it, and you think that your new card carries over, as it does in many cases. Sometimes when people are trying to stop the payments, they can't stop them, and they're like, well, I even changed credit card numbers, and they still don't care. They carry it over. But at any rate, this happens, I guess, with donations from time to time, and Matthew found that this was the case, and then looking back and saying, I ought to boost my contribution via Patreon, astonished to find out that he was no longer making those contributions because the card had expired at some point, and that happens to a lot of people. No fault of their own, and we all totally understand. Although, yeah, I guess you should know. You should go and check and find out that everything's working as you expect it to be working, because, well, you want it to be working that way, and so do I. And also, sometimes it doesn't, I won't know the difference. All I know is somebody has no longer a supporter, and if I run the reports about people who have left, it just looks like somebody has up and said, I don't like this show anymore, and I don't support it anymore, as opposed to, I didn't know that they stopped charging me. So, anyway, just a warning there. And by the way, while I have your attention, here's another issue. Tell me if you're having trouble with this one, because I have reports from certain people, and you know who you are, that when they went to boost their contribution, having been contributing at the time, I think $10 monthly and wanting to do $15, found that Patreon's user interface either just plain didn't allow or made extremely difficult the adjustment from 10 to 15. And in this case, apparently that the way, I don't know whether it had anything to do with the way that they'd signed up or whether it's the way I had set the thing up, but moving from off of 10, like she just, said, all right, well, I want to change my contribution. That was clear enough. Click that. And then the options available were, there was no option to just type in the new amount. You had to select from, a predetermined menu of choices, which was apparently, $150 or $1,500, which would all be great, except for the fact that no one is going to want to select those things. But 15 is something people might want to select. Anybody else having any difficulty like that? I have definitely seen, and I've noted for you in the past, a number of people who've successfully boosted their contributions, and if any of you have run into the same problem and conquered it immediately, we'd love to know how, so we can pass that news along. Okay, well, as I mentioned, there were other contributions being made here, this meaning contributions of stories that ought to be covered, and this seemed like a good one, and Scott Anderson, I think, sent this one along, so 2 good reasons to read this one, one of which is they're very interesting, or it's very interesting. It is, where am I reading this from? rsn.org. That's readersupportednews.org, apparently. So They have this, and it says they have a funding crisis. So if you're saying to yourself, sure, I want to give more money, but it doesn't all have to go to Kagro in the morning. Well, for one thing, consult your doctor. Something is clearly wrong. And two, I don't know, maybe reader-supported news is a thing you could... I don't know. They're having a funding crisis. Daily Kos says it's having a funding crisis. Networks Radio, for all I know, could be having a funding crisis. They're also always in need of support. Plenty of people are. But for some reason, this big orange sans serif font is just punching me in the face here. So good job to the designers there. But rsn.org has the article. This group gets left-leaning policies passed in red states. How? Ballot measures. Laura Benshoff of NPR gives away the game entirely. That's it. They use ballot measures. So go figure out how to use ballot measures in your red state if you happen to live in one, and you can get left-leaning policies passed. There's probably more to it, though. And if we scroll down, we can share those things with you. One side effect, it begins, of political division in the states, blue states getting bluer and red states getting redder, is that some policies don't have a chance of getting passed by partisan state legislatures, even if a majority of voters back them. And there are all sorts of such issues. I don't know that you'd be able to succeed necessarily in the abortion arena, but that's a good example of where if you poll people and just say, all right, does there really still have to be access to abortion in this state or what? And 60% of the people say yes, there really does need to be that access, but the entirety of the state legislature says no. And not only that, but we're going to eliminate the various exceptions we used to have for as they used to say, rape, incest, and life of the mother. That was the handy catchphrase that they used to show that they weren't inhumane after all. But now, of course, they're eliminating all of these things. Well, anyway, right. So this is the setup. Blue states getting bluer, red states getting redder. Sometimes even when a majority of people in the state back a policy, you can't get it through because the party in charge of the state legislature is ideologically opposed either to that thing or just ideologically opposed to having the other side, whatever that other side may be, win anything at all, even if they actually even agree with it. So, a left-leaning advocacy group called the Fairness Project. Maybe you said, I'd like to pass a ballot initiative in my state. Who should I call that's so skilled at doing this? And the answer is the Fairness Project. They have created a playbook for using ballot initiatives to go around GOP-led state legislatures. So exactly what you're looking for, call the Fairness Project. They have a playbook. Since 2016, it has backed successful initiatives to raise the minimum wage and expand Medicaid in at least 9 states, 9 times. That's right. 9 states entirely run or mostly run by Republicans at the time of the vote. It also works in democratically led states, as you might have imagined. And then, of course, you stand a better chance in those democratically led states if the referendum passes of the state legislature not saying, to hell with it, we're going to override the referendum, as they did in where? Missouri? Was that right? Anyway, now it's one of several groups, this Fairness Project is, gearing up to put what I said you might not succeed with, abortion rights on the ballot in 2024. You might not, but you might succeed. And you really should, especially if you poll people and they say 60% plus say we got to have some basic access rights here in this state, then yeah, that referendum should win. But the recent success of such measures in Republican-led states, like Kansas did this, right, has drawn criticism from lawmakers and helped fuel a raft of attempts to curb ballot measures. Well, what did you expect was going to be the reaction of these legislatures? People are going around us. They're running end runs around us and rendering our power somehow lesser by passing these laws over and above our objection. Couldn't we do something about that? Sure, why not? We have plenary power here. We're the state legislature. What if we ban referenda. They're allowed by law now. Perhaps we could undo it. Well, by the way, another drawback on the ballot measure initiative here is explained in this next section, I imagine, which is entitled Ballot Measures Are Expensive and Time-Consuming. So look out for this. Here we are. When Missouri-based minimum wage advocates wanted to run a statewide ballot initiative in 2017, they turned to the Fairness Project. I saw Missouri here, but it's a different ballot initiative, but dangerous territory for ballot initiatives generally, Missouri. We're sort of figuring things out as we go, and the Fairness Project is a particular expert on this tactic, says Missouri Jobs with Justice political director Richard Van Glan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Kansas City and St. Louis had tried hiking their minimum wages, but those efforts were overruled by state lawmakers. A ballot initiative would raise the minimum wage across the state if voters approved it, but winning takes more than just motivated people with clipboards, says Kelly Hall, executive director of the Fairness Project. Citizen initiative ballot measures to change laws or state constitutions are possible in nearly half of U.S. states. To qualify for the ballot, petitions must gather thousands of signatures. Some campaigns then spend tens of millions of dollars to raise awareness among voters. The high cost of campaigns often mean they can act as policy vehicles for corporate interests, such as apps employing gig workers or sports betting companies. I guess they have the money to go out and do the petitioning that's necessary to get on the ballot, plus do the awareness raising that's probably necessary for getting people to get out and actually cast votes on this ballot initiative. The Fairness Project, the brainchild of a California-based healthcare workers union, was created with the idea of using ballot measures to address quality of life issues. SEIU and UHW, it's SEIU-UHW now combined, I guess. President Dave Regan tells NPR, I assume he pronounces it Regan as R-E-G-A-N. That's the way Don Regan used to do it. Maybe he's departing from that. I don't know. We need to speak to the common good, he says. Next section, money and messaging help sway conservative voters. How about that? To do that, the Fairness, that is to say, speak to the common good. To do that, the Fairness Project partners with local advocacy organizations and national nonprofits to provide the technical expertise needed to run a ballot campaign. Or perhaps, I don't know. I've never seen anybody refer back to the section title that way. They usually throw those in the middle of the narrative. So when they say to do that, I'm not sure whether they mean to speak to the common good or to help sway conservative voters. But now I'm thinking they meant sway conservative voters. That means surveying voters early in the process to gauge whether an issue has enough public support to succeed, and helping to set up signature gathering. The group also vets the language of the proposed constitutional amendment or statute to make sure it can withstand legal challenges, said Hall. When it comes to public messaging, the Fairness Project tests which narratives will sway the largest number of voters. For example, talking about bringing voters' federal tax dollars back to their state may get more votes for Medicaid expansion than talking about it as a benefit program. Folks who can separate these issues from their partisan identity are the folks that get us over the finish line in these conservative states, says Hall. Financing is another part of the process. The Fairness Project sometimes contributes directly to the state-level campaigns that they work with, but is rarely the largest donor, according to campaign finance records. Other financial backers of the measure include dark money groups, progressive nonprofits, or in the case of Medicaid expansion, business and healthcare associations. The Fairness Project, which operates as a 501c4 nonprofit, a social welfare organization, does not have to disclose its funders or all of its activities, drawing criticism from a right-leaning research group that investigates environmentalist and union spending. It's interesting, of course, this is a liberal group, so in this case, using 501c4's shield such that you don't have to report all of your funders and activities, etc., that draws the ire of, in this case, conservative activists and conservative opponents. Ordinarily, it is liberal and progressive people who are up in arms about the disguising of that sort of information or the hiding of that sort of information. And there may very well be people who, oppose it on principle, even when a progressive or liberal group is making use of the same loophole. It's just interesting, though, that the people who say it's totally awesome when they do it, are very vocal when they find out people are using the same tactic but using it against them. Whereas I guess is there any real difference between silence as your hypocrisy versus vocal hypocrisy? I don't know. You tell me. Anyway, Communications and Digital Strategy Director Alexis Magnan-Callaway declined to share a list of Fairness Project funders with NPR, but says unions, foundations, and individuals contribute to our work. Next up here, abortion has shaken up the ballot measure space. That is true. I like I said, I was worried about not worried about, but I would have, initially probably bet against the outcome that they ended up getting in states like Kansas and elsewhere. I was very surprised, as I think a lot of people were. People who work inside the space probably not so much, and they knew enough to pursue the ballot initiative and were less surprised when they actually won in places like Kansas. But hey, since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the constitutional right to abortion last year, all state ballot measures affirming abortion rights have been approved, and all of those to restrict the rights have been rejected. So that's like a 100% record. The Fairness Project was involved with a $40 million campaign to pass Prop 3 in Michigan last year, back on Michigan, which codified abortion rights in that state. It's now exploring such measures in several more states where abortion is restricted or banned. These plans come as state legislatures move to clamp down on the ballot process. Lawmakers in at least 4 states, Ohio, Florida, Idaho, and Missouri, have recently introduced or advanced measures to make citizen-initiated measures more difficult to run or to pass. Last year, 11 state legislatures introduced or advanced bills that would introduce new barriers. In Missouri, Republican State Representative Mike Henderson told his colleagues during a recent session that the state constitution has become too easy to edit. I believe that the Missouri Constitution is a living document, but not an ever-expanding document, he said. Henderson also argued that citizens of Missouri may not understand what they're voting on, and that such campaigns can be intentionally misleading. The State House of Representatives later approved a resolution he proposed, which calls for raising the threshold to pass citizen-initiated ballot measures from a simple majority to 60%. Wow, they're going to have a filibuster for this. However, Democrats have called the measure itself misleading because it opens with language about only allowing U.S. citizens to vote, something already enshrined in the Missouri Constitution. So they figure that's an interesting ploy. And you ramble on about only allowing U.S. citizens to vote, which A, is already true, and B, is something that makes people say, well, of course, yes. There are lots of people who actually just, will see that and then tune out and not read the rest of it and will say, yeah, I'll vote in support of, I don't know what this ballot initiative is about, but I started to read it and it said only allowing U.S. citizens to vote. I'm for that. Yes. But it's really a ballot measure about not allowing you to vote on ballot measures anymore, which is pretty ironic. And then if you don't read it, you end up voting yes and lose your ability to, determine your own future, which is kind of the point. But okay, the effort to curtail the initiative process seems to me like a purely political power play, says David Kimball, a political scientist at the University of Missouri at St. Louis. He says lawmakers are likely trying to head off future abortion rights ballot measures and want to keep the power to make laws or introduce constitutional amendments for themselves. Well, sure they do. They're jealously guarding their prerogatives. That's not a terrible thing, but it's not exactly a fair game either. Especially, I like that. So what a sneaky tactic to make the first couple lines of the ballot initiative about something completely different and hope that people just don't finish reading it and end up casting their vote in favor of it before they get to the meat of what the proposal actually is. How interesting. All right. So again, thanks to Scott for passing that one on. Not Scott Adams, the Dilbert guy, but Scott Anderson, the decent guy who writes up all our summaries, which, by the way, it was also pointed out to me very recently that not everyone is entirely familiar when I say that he writes up a summary of the day's events, complete with links to all the articles that we discuss. Does everybody know where to find that? And the answer always was easy when we were mostly a Daily Kos reading audience, but maybe that has changed. But you know Daily Kos, of course. You'll find it at dailykos.com. And you know a way to navigate through the personal blogs? Because at dailykos.com/blogs/Daily Kos Radio, you'll find those summaries. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think it may be the case that as we were exiting to commercial, I don't know our commercial, you know what we do here. Well, it's possible that we may have cut off and you didn't hear the entirety of the URL where you can find all of Scott Anderson's summaries. Plus, it deserves some explanation anyway. So I thought I would go back and make sure that everybody got it. I was sort of hurrying through it. But yes, you can find it on what amounts to well, you remember back when Daily Kos sort of divided itself up into the front page and then, of course, the personal blogs, and they restructured things. So what we used to call the diaries. And at any rate, you can find it, the URL, fairly simple. You know, Daily Kos, dailykos.com. So again, lots of slashes, and I hate when they get into the slashes, but this is what it is. dailykos.com/blogs, plural, /Daily Kos Radio, and it's all one word, and it's the wrong words, you may know. We're not Daily Kos Radio. We no longer, anyway, are Daily Kos Radio. We are Kagro in the Morning, fully independent from Daily Kos and the Daily Kos organization for some time now. And the issue, though, is we made all of that separation everywhere except in the URL here because we discovered, well, although you can change the logo and change the identity and how you refer to the show, if you change the URL, you're going to lose all of the previous shows and all the previous summaries, and they're not going to be in the same place. And so while we did everything we could to, separate and remove the Daily Kos identifier from the KITM brand per se, just, so everything was nice and clean, there was this problem. So we ended up having to retain that. So yes, we're not Daily Kos Radio, and we haven't been for some time now, but that's where you can find it. And once you get it in there and you've searched it once or twice, you can either bookmark it or you'll be able to find the URL again because your computer remembers everything you do, and, talk about the wisdom of that someday. But at any rate, there they are. dailykos.com/blogs/Daily Kos Radio. You will find two types, generally, of diaries on that feed. One, the morning, hey, we're going live at 9 a.m. Post with all, if you open it up and look at all the details down at the bottom, below the fold, as we used to say back in the day, when people folded things, when there was paper involved, all the various ways that you can listen live. And click to. And then if you miss it, the afternoon when we post the summaries from Scott Anderson. They always include a link to the YouTube podcast, the YouTube version of the podcast. So you can just, click and play it and listen in. And below in the text portion of the post is where Scott Anderson summarizes things, and it is sometimes a faithful recitation of exactly what happened, and but very often is also splashed appropriately, spiced with dashes of flair and departure, sometimes from the actual narrative of what was on the show, and he gives his own spin and color to things, and indeed, very often, supplementary materials of his own that he thinks backs up or fully fleshes out exactly what it was we were talking about, and I appreciate that addition to it. But at the very least, if you are ever stuck and can't find an article that I refer to, although I usually give you the source, the name of the writer, that sometimes doesn't help, but read you the headline. If for some reason you can't find it, certainly the links to everything that we've talked about that I can remember and pass on to Scott, they're there. And very often, if I've forgotten one, Scott, who's listening along, says, you didn't mention, or you didn't send me any link on this one. I'll find one and go and get it. So there you have it. And others of you might use it differently and just say, I missed today's show. I'm thinking of listening to the podcast. I don't know if I have all day to listen to the 2 hours, but let's see what was discussed today. We'll see whether or not I want to start out on this, or do I want to jump to a different section, or do I have all day for listening to this thing? So, I don't know why we do 2 hours. We just do. There's a lot of news. All right. So let's see. Yes. Also, along the way, I mentioned I was thinking during the reading of this story about the ballot initiatives and their interest in going head on at the abortion question in states where you might otherwise have thought it would be fruitless to do so. Did I not retweet this thing? I don't know. I thought I had seen over the weekend in Mastodon a fascinating compilation of headlines to accompany the latest headline, which was that one of the Duggar family, you remember the whole 19 kids and counting family, and I guess one of the 19 kids, presumably, I guess they all have I guess that reality series continues, and a lot of those kids are adults now and having their own kids. And, of course, as you might have imagined, the 19 kids and counting Duggars were also very vocal anti-abortion activists. And abortion is terrible and it's a Holocaust and yada, yada, yada. Certainly has been their mantra in the past. As it turns out, People magazine, I believe, reporting that one of the Duggar daughters, went and had herself an abortion. Except it was a totally reasonable and cool one, and not like the ones you have, which are terrible and filthy. But apparently she, got a terrible, devastating, I'm sure, checkup with the doctor, but got word that, this fetus is not going to make it. The baby isn't going to make it to term. You will miscarry this baby. But, again, this is the sort of thing that happens all the time. And tragic as it is, it's important, of course, that women be able to get access to the kind of healthcare you need for this situation, which is to say an abortion before the event, that waiting for things to take the natural course, which is, it sounds like, maybe the easier or healthier thing to do, but in fact, in many cases is not. And very often your doctors will rightfully recommend, let's do this surgically under controlled circumstances, and it will preserve your ability in all likelihood to simply try again later once you get over the loss. It doesn't change the loss at all, but it does make things safer. And it's just interesting that having advocated to eliminate that ability for everybody else, the Duggars, when push came to shove and it was their turn for something like this, they wanted access to the safe medical procedure after all. And golly gee, isn't that weird? But People magazine sort of helped them along in that by not referring to the procedure as an abortion. Referred to it by its full name of the what I had only known as the D&C procedure, but is dilation and is it curettage? Is that how it's pronounced? I don't know. People just use the shorthand for it, but that's an abortion. But somehow it was a totally cool and totally godly one for the Duggars and is crap and will damn you to hell if you get one. So just another one of those situations where the Republicans reserve the right for themselves to do these things that are done for reasons that all you filthy, awful people clearly couldn't possibly have, because only the Duggars would get a reason like that handed to them by God. And it's weird that People magazine didn't point out exactly what was going on here. But, don't get your news from People magazine is I guess what I'm saying. All right, we'll go and look that one up. This is the sort of thing that I usually have at hand, but if I can't remember it, we go and dig it up later. And then if I don't remember to dig it up later, Scott digs it up later. But you might not even need that because you know what People magazine is and where to find it, and you know how to spell Duggar. So there you go. All right. That was just astonishing to me. I happened to see that one over the weekend and was somewhat related. Other things that I saw over the weekend and put away for you on the same topic, in a way. Here in the Washington Post by Caroline Kitchener and Ann E. Marimow. I don't know. I make myself crazy with these things. The Texas judge who could take down the abortion pill, a devout Christian, Matthew Kacsmaryk, we've mentioned his name before, has been shaped by his deep anti-abortion beliefs. That's about the most mild way you could possibly have put it. What's the story with this guy? And keep in mind that where did you hear his name most recently? It was if you heard it in our show, it was our discussion of the weird way by which Texas has structured its federal court system such that there are mini districts, essentially, with just one judge in them. And if you file your case in that district, you will get that judge because they're the only judge. And if you happen to know that that judge is a rabid anti-abortion activist, that's where you'll take your abortion cases. And lo and behold, they have done exactly that. And here's the scoop. He's in Abilene, Texas, I guess, because that's the dateline on the story. Matthew Kacsmaryk, and I guess I'm pronouncing it correctly, I don't know, was a 22-year-old law student when he drove to a small city in West Texas to spend a day with a baby he would probably never see again. He was in Abilene to support his sister, who, pregnant at 17, had fled to a faraway maternity home to avoid the scorn she feared from their Christian community. But holding his nephew in his arms, then leaving the baby with adoptive parents, also solidified Kacsmaryk's belief that every pregnancy should be treasured. In other words, the genius Matthew Kacsmaryk took from the fact that one adoption was successfully executed to mean that everybody absolutely can, should, and must exercise exactly the same option, because after all, everybody's the same. My sister did it, why can't you? Well, there might be reasons why it doesn't work that way. But, okay, certainly believing in adoption say believing in adoption. It happens. I believe it. There's nobody that doesn't believe in it. But is it for everybody in every situation? No, it's probably not. Despite the fact that a 22-year-old law student at some point, and a male at that, reached that conclusion on behalf of all women. Anyway, but holding his nephew in his arms, then leaving the baby with adoptive parents also solidified Kaczmarek's belief that every pregnancy should be treasured, his sister recalled, even those that don't fit neatly into a family's future plans or might kill that family. Okay. You might as well throw that in there. Almost 16 years later, in 2016, Kaczmarek drove back to Abilene for his first meeting as a board member of Christian Homes and Family Services, the organization that had taken in his sister when she chose adoption over abortion. He's very passionate about the fact that you can't preach pro-life and do nothing, says Kaczmarek's sister, Jennifer Griffith. We both hold the stance that you have to do something. You can't not. Now 45 and a federal judge. Look, a pronunciation guide. Kaczmarek, which is Kaczmarek, I guess, is how they would have you pronounce it, which I assume is how he would have you pronounce it, is the now 45 and a federal judge. He has the opportunity to impose the most far-reaching limit on abortion access since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June. The judge, nominated by President Trump and confirmed in 2019, will soon rule on a lawsuit seeking to revoke U.S. government approval of mifepristone. I don't know how you pronounce the key abortion medication, as they tell you. Mifepristone, I don't know. And I'm not going to find out either. That outcome could, at least temporarily, halt over half the legal abortions carried out across the country, including in states led by Democrats where abortion rights are protected. But he can do it alone from Abilene, Texas. While many experts have said the case relies on baseless medical claims, and why not rule on baseless stuff, right? What's the difference? It is Kaczmarek's role as presiding judge that has the abortion rights movement bracing for another crippling defeat. The abortion pills lawsuit, which Kaczmarek could rule on any day, is the latest in a long line of politically explosive cases to appear on the judge's docket. In a practice known as forum shopping, conservative groups have zeroed in on the Amarillo division of the Northern District of Texas as the go-to place to challenge a wide range of Biden administration policies. Because Amarillo is a federal district with a single judge, plaintiffs know their arguments will be heard by Kaczmarek, who, like any federal judge, is positioned to issue rulings with nationwide implications. Appeals from Kaczmarek's district follow a path that has regularly yielded favorable outcomes for conservatives. Reviewed first by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, which upheld a strict Texas abortion ban long before Roe v. Wade was overturned, then ultimately by the conservative-controlled Supreme Court. Kaczmarek, who ascended to the federal bench from the conservative legal group First Liberty Institute, has defended his ability to be impartial, he says, in his work as a judge. I don't think that's really true, but that's what he likes to say about himself. Nonetheless, many of his recent decisions have been wins for the right, including one that struck down new Biden administration protections for transgender people, and another that forced thousands of asylum seekers to return to Mexico while they awaited processing. Kaczmarek is also presiding over a lawsuit filed by anti-vaccine activists led by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., accusing several media outlets, including the Washington Post, of colluding to censor their views on coronavirus vaccines. Ooh. The Washington Post interviewed 20 people who know Kaczmarek, who declined to comment for this story, including his close friends, former colleagues, and family members. What emerges is a portrait of a religious conservative who is widely regarded as a thorough and analytical legal thinker, but who also comes to his judicial work with a long history of activism rooted in his religious beliefs. This account includes previously unreported details about the nature and strength of his anti-abortion convictions, and it looks to be a rather lengthy article at that. I would say probably I would leave this for you to read on your own, but just give you another hint or two from another paragraph. Lawyers for the Alliance Defending Freedom, the law firm behind the abortion pill case, would not say whether Kaczmarek's presence impacted their decision to file in Amarillo. Do you think it didn't? You think it's because of all the, it's like the abortion capital of the world, Amarillo, Texas, right? That's why they filed there. What other reason could there be? But other conservative lawyers say it makes sense to bring cases before Kaczmarek, whom they described as a, quote, textualist who adheres closely to the text of the law and the Constitution, an interpretive approach that can lend itself to conservative outcomes on issues like abortion. Like you can just say, show me in the Constitution where it says abortion. It doesn't? Okay, therefore, that's textualism when you need it to work that way. Liberal advocates accuse Kaczmarek of making decisions based on personal ideology rather than the law. The evidence does not suggest he is a textualist, says Rachel O'Leary Carmona, the executive director of the Women's March, who lives in Amarillo and led a protest ahead of Kaczmarek's ruling on abortion pills. The evidence suggests that he's an activist. When Kaczmarek appeared before the Senate in 2017, he vowed to be fair. Of course you would do that, right? As a judge, I'm no longer in the advocate role, he said. I'm in the role of reading and applying with all good faith whatever Supreme Court and Fifth Circuit precedent is binding. Many close to Kaczmarek say he would not allow his own opinions to affect his legal judgment. No, of course not. We'll read this through here. He's never struck me as someone who is out there to remake the world or to remake the law in his own way from the bench, said Ephraim Wernick, a former federal prosecutor and Kaczmarek's law school classmate and friend. I would never expect him to impose his personal beliefs on others. Still, Griffith, Kaczmarek's sister, said she's glad her brother will be the one deciding whether to ban the country's most common form of abortion care. I feel like he was made for this, said Griffith, who remains staunchly opposed to abortion. He is exactly where he needs to be. All right. Well, you can take a look at the rest of the background profile that begins with his leaving home at age 18 to head from Fort Worth to Abilene Christian University, a deeply conservative campus known for its Bible major and mandatory daily chapel, just like most kids. Anyway, you can read all about his background. You can read more about forum shopping as well. Perhaps I've been holding on to a story about it from, did Ian Millhiser write this one? I think so. And just kind of holding on to it for a while because we read another piece that actually described it pretty well already, but it's kind of also worth hearing discussion of something that important from Ian Millhiser too, if that is indeed who wrote this. But I'll find it, I think, and I'll include it in what I provide to Scott. We got a couple minutes left here, and I thought I would hit on a couple other interesting issues that are floating around out there. I guess, there's like 15 different directions to go. Why don't we try this one just because Greg earlier brought up the COVID topic once again, always of interest. And this is something I discovered over the weekend and I thought was, not another one just like this. Okay, GOP ex-senator, that is to say GOP, GOP ex-senator Inhofe, remember Jim Inhofe, retired, as it happens. I don't know if you realized that he was retired, but he did. He retired. But guess why? Due to long COVID after opposing COVID aid, though, thanks to reporter Sarah Boboltz of the HuffPost here, but it's Boboltz. I'm sure I ruined it somehow. The longtime senator from Oklahoma said complications from the virus contributed to his stepping aside. That's the subheader here. But I think you can read the real meaning of the whole post here. Former Senator Jim Inhofe, Republican of Oklahoma, attributed his decision to retire due to the long-term effects of COVID-19. That's a poorly constructed sentence. He attributed his decision to retire to the long-term effects of COVID-19, telling local newspaper The Tulsa World that certain symptoms were still affecting him day to day. He's got long COVID. And of course, he was not a COVID denialist per se, but very big on preventing anybody. You're not going to need all sorts of aid for so long. There's no such thing as long COVID. It's a cold, it's the flu, it's et cetera. You don't need any extra help. And then, of course, he was able to rely on his own personal fortunes afterwards to take care of himself, whereas everybody else, screw you. That's the basic hypocrisy at work here. Inhofe voted against multiple coronavirus aid packages meant to help Americans at the height of the pandemic, including the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, approved overwhelmingly by 90 senators in March of 2020, and the American Rescue Plan in March of 2021. The 88-year-old did not say much, or rather did not say which symptoms he's still dealing with, but he suggested he was in good company, alleging that other elected representatives in Congress are also struggling with long COVID behind the scenes. They are, and a lot of them are struggling with it in front of the scenes too. But check out this conceit. I love this one. 5 or 6 others have long COVID, but I'm the only one who admits it, Inhofe told Tulsa World. Well, as they point out in the very next paragraph, at least one Democratic senator, Tim Kaine of Virginia, has spoken openly, and I think at great length, about his experience with lingering symptoms after contracting COVID-19. But in Jim Inhofe's world, I'm the only one with the guts to admit. You can't call me a hypocrite. I'm the only one with the guts to admit it. Well, no, you're not. And you're admitting it now, I guess, but one, you didn't admit it before. Why not? And 2, you voted against helping anybody. Well, I didn't need help, so why should anybody else? My sister didn't have an abortion, so no one else should. Inhofe's chief of staff, Luke Holland, announced the senator had a very mild case of the virus almost exactly 1 year ago, the same day Inhofe announced he would be retiring. So it wasn't the reason. I'm sure he didn't say, I have COVID, I'm retiring. But I'm sure that contributing to the I guess, after the fact, reflection on his decision to retire, he probably said, yeah, well, that was clearly the right decision because I can't keep working at the same level with long COVID. Anyway, his seat was filled in a special election by Markwayne Mullin, a Republican who had been representing Oklahomans in the House. Inhofe was well known for labeling climate change as a hoax, but as COVID-19 began rapidly spreading around the U.S., he urged caution, even as he made light of precautionary measures. I'd be the first to say we're overreacting because that's kind of how I am, but we're not, Inhofe told Tulsa World in March 2020 in an interview where he recalled trying to scare a New York Times reporter with a handshake. You remember that incident? I think I actually do recall that one now that I think about it. He was making light. Everyone was like, let's cut down on the hand-to-hand contact, unnecessary hand-to-hand contact through handshakes. And he was chasing the guy around, making light of the very precautions that were supposed to help at the time, we thought might help people prevent spreading it and contracting it themselves. And then, boom, he got it. And, it's just the flu. Well, it's really not. And you can have long lingering effects, and to hell with everybody else who might need help with those effects because they haven't been as fortunate as you. I think that's a rotten position to take. And then, of course, I don't know what's driving the idea that he thinks he's the only one who will admit it when Kaine has been quite open and forthright about it in the hopes of raising consciousness about it. But not Inhofe. He's going to hide from it and pretend it's not part of his decision making and pretend that he doesn't have it up until the time when he's cornered and has to announce it and then says, I'm the only one with the guts to do it. It's kind of rotten. Anyway, time now to wrap things up and just about time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Maybe we can squeeze in one last quick story, and maybe not the whole thing, but just, why not? We'll throw in this thing and give some recognition to this person. A story I read in The Hill by Brooke Migdon. The headline pretty much says it all. State lawmaker vows to filibuster all bills, until the GOP withdraws abortion and gender-affirming care bans. Okay. I like the leverage of, if you're not going to get rid of the filibuster and you're going to leave it there as leverage, Why not use it as leverage this way? It's Nebraska State Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly there. It's an interesting spelling of what might, I think, be Michaela. On Thursday, she pledged to filibuster every bill in the state's legislative agenda this season. And remember, this is in Nebraska. And in Nebraska's famous for their unicameral legislature. Isn't that right? So it's not just holding one house up, it's holding up the entire legislature to say you're going to do something like this. So again, Michaela Kavanaugh, a Democrat, pledged to filibuster every bill in the state's legislative agenda this session if two Republican-backed bills seeking to ban both abortion and gender-affirming health care for transgender youth are not immediately withdrawn. If this legislature collectively decides that legislating hate against children is our priority, then I am going to make it painful. Painful for everyone. Kavanaugh, one of just 17 Democrats in Nebraska's unicameral legislature, said Thursday at the state capitol in Lincoln, because if you want to inflict pain on our children, I am going to inflict pain upon this body. I have nothing but time, Kavanaugh said, and I am going to use all of it. How about that? I'm going to skip down just to get this quote here. I want to annoy you, Kavanaugh told her colleagues on Thursday. I want you to be genuinely frustrated to all get out, as in, okay, with me. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Kavanaugh's filibuster aims to slow the progress of those two controversial bills moving through the Nebraska legislature. And of course, well, one would establish a fetal heartbeat law that bans abortions after cardiac activity is detected. You know all about that one. And of course, anti-transgender, popular, unfortunately, almost everywhere in Republican America.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, time now for Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, of course. Where do we start with him today? Security and safety concerns continue to be raised over Kevin McCarthy giving Tucker Carlson exclusive January 6th footage. Elsewhere on the menu, millions who rely on Medicaid are under threat of being booted from the program this year. Stay tuned to find out why and how.